Hello, I'm Suba. I'm Artistic Director and Chief Executive of HighTide. HighTide is a new writing theatre company and registered charity. We produce and present new plays all over the UK and create education and outreach programmes to especially engage with audiences in the East of England. I'm delighted to be joined today by Aisha Zia, one of our associate artists. Aisha.
Hi, I'm Aisha Zia. I'm a playwright and I'm an associate artist at HighTide.
So we're going to talk a little today about our journeys into theatre making and the roles that we do. For me, as artistic director at HighTide, I think people often assume that that role is about flouncing about in a rehearsal room, wearing a beret, being very artistic and mad and creative. But actually, the role of artistic director is about organisation, first and foremost. So we set up the budgets, we look at all of the resources and the fundraising and the cash we need to ensure we can make our projects stack up. So actually one of the most useful things for me throughout my career to date has been my maths GCSE. So there we have it. What about for you, Aisha? What's your route been into your role now?
I mean, it's funny you should talk about your maths GCSE because I'm a writer, and one of the things that I find about writing is that it's actually quite scientific. I kind of feel like I'm using my sort of mathematical brain more than my creative brain. But my way into playwriting was actually quite a delayed journey. So I came to it a little bit later in life. I was a picture editor for 10 years. So I was commissioning photography, working in news and features for the Financial Times and the Independent. So lots of newspaper supplements, but it was a perfect place to be really because I learned a trade, which is very useful as a freelancing artist now, so I could dip into freelancing. But also it was just so visual. It was a visual storytelling technique, and I was at the hub of information, which I found really useful. So by the time I did my MA in creative writing and I decided to be a playwright, like that wealth of knowledge just sort of hit me, and I kind of knew what stories I wanted to write and who they were for, so I kind of knew about audience and narrative structure and actually how to articulate what I wanted to say by imagining what I could see. So all of that stuff was really useful, actually.
I think that's a really important thing you say there about the idea of the arts, the importance of learning a trade within the arts, because we all have to be business people in this sector as well, because we need to raise money for projects, we need to know how to connect with potential funders, supporters and sponsors, and also ensure that our working practices are safe, compliant. That certainly in my role there's a lot of dealing through all of the legal ramifications and parameters of creating safe working spaces for audiences and community. So that's everything from health and safety legislation to employment contracts and all of this sort of stuff. So it's actually very practical, and I think sometimes the arts gets a bad rep for not being as practical and driven as other sectors.
Or even as professional, I think. And I think there's so many transferable skills that I learn, everything from organising myself to even editing, because I think there's a lot of writing is rewriting. So, I'm quite passionate about the skills that I have, and I love writing, but again, I see it as a job, it's not a novelty. So yeah, and also just I made myself a promise, which was that I was never going to work for free. I think there's a myth in the arts, which is that there's no money, and as the artist, I didn't want to be at the bottom of the food chain, and I thought if someone else is going to get paid in this organisation, I deserve to be paid. So I learned a lot about what it feels like to earn a living and to earn a standard of living, and like what sort of life I wanted, and if I was going to be an artist, I wanted to be a practical, functional artist who could basically survive.
Exactly, that resilience is such an important thing about pursuing a career in the arts. Certainly, for me and for my background from a very working class family, grew up on a council estate in the north of England, I wouldn't be able to pursue this career if I didn't really feel like I was going to be able to pay the bills.
Well, exactly. I think it has to be a viable career option which I think it absolutely is. But I think, again, there's a lot of myth busting to do, which is being an artist is a craft, and it is a job, and it is something you can do every day. And there's just so many transferable skills, learning to collaborate, learning to communicate well, articulating yourself not just on the page, but with, a team of people, and even resilience, but being patient, because I think as a playwright, you have to wait to see your work. And I've just found that managing my time and juggling lots of different projects is just really helpful and quite healthy to have. Whereas early on in my career, when I was writing, I'd probably write one play a year and then freelance as a picture editor to sort of balance the books. Whereas now I'm a full-time playwright, I kind of do have to think about 3 or 4 plays at any one given moment, and also they're all at different stages, so it's kind of like spinning plates. And sometimes I get overwhelmed, and sometimes I'm like, God, that's a lot of information to hold in your brain. And I guess the nature of the plays that I work on, they're quite full, and they're quite sort of thematically heavy and intense, and so sometimes you have to sort of look at the bigger picture, and then other times you have to step back from it and kind of go, actually, life happens over here, and this is my work. So actually, in terms of attachment and detachment, they're also skills that I think as a freelance artist you have to get good at doing, and that takes time and it takes practice.
Aisha, what advice would you have for young people looking to begin a journey into playwriting?
The thing that worked for me, and I would advise young people, is to try lots of different things. And actually the famous advice for a playwright is go and do something else. So actually that really worked for me, because I did my MA, and then I just threw myself into the picture editing, and I was just working, and I kind of almost waited for it to come back to me. And then slowly it sort of did, and then I was writing and I was working, and it was like a symbiotic relationship where one was feeding the other. And then there was a natural point of departure where the playwriting took over, and I was able to let go of the picture editing. And I think, the thing about playwriting is you write from experience and you write from life, and if you're not doing that, then you kind of sit at your desk thinking, well, what shall I write about? Because I haven't felt that. And I do channel my experiences into my work. And the most amazing thing about writing is that you learn something. So I tend to work on projects that I think I don't know much about, and it's only when I start writing that I have this wealth of experience that I can connect to it. So I can connect to my characters, I can connect to the story, and I can imagine how that would happen. So I guess the best advice to someone going into playwriting is just go and live your life and have a rich experience and do lots of different things.
I think there is a myth still that you have to be on the train tracks to your job from the second you're 13, 14, and that you will only have one career in your life, which I think is increasingly untrue, and especially for young people now. And so I think what you say there is really interesting and important for young people to have in mind, which is that you can start to explore other avenues and come to the creative arts post-degree, slightly later into life, if you have gone that university route, and that is valid, and actually, in terms of your experience, really important, because there's something about being in the world and experiencing lots of different things before coming to that writing process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a confidence building thing. 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been as confident as I am now in my ability to create. So there's this thing that happens, which is, you do have self-doubt. And actually the thing that I've learned recently, because you're always having epiphanies, but my recent one is that art doesn't go anywhere. And actually creativity doesn't go anywhere, it just comes and goes, and there's almost no point in sitting around waiting for it. So I think the more you keep yourself busy and curious and interested in other things. I mean, you know, not to say, you know, you've got to go and get another job, but just follow your other interests. You know, it's possible to do lots of different things and dip in and out of everything. And just, I also think there's something to be said for being self-made. So I didn't wait around for a commission. The other thing I promised myself, aside from to not work for free, was that I wasn't going to sit around and ask to be commissioned or to make work. I was just going to make my own work, which means that, you know, you have to show initiative. You know, there's more myths that we can bust here, but anyone can fill out an Arts Council application form. So I wanted to be a playwright, but I also wanted to be a theatre maker. And being a theatre maker means being very practical. So it means meeting people, go and find a director, go and find a set builder, go and find a producer, or produce it yourself. In fact, early on I was producing my own work whilst I was writing it, because I was like, I want to make this show. I can raise the funds, I can cast it, I can design my own flyers, you know, I can do my own promotions. And actually I used to be a promoter for a club night, so I used to go out and promote parties. So actually promoting a play felt like promoting a party. Yeah. And then you just get to invite lots of people to come and see your show. So
yeah, that journey is very, very similar to mine in terms of, so when you are a professional director, you can wait around for other production companies to give you a call and say, we've got this show, would you like to do it? Or you can go out there and start to try to build your projects yourself, which was a huge part of my early career, which meant that I was doing all of that organising, and I was setting up Facebook pages and doing the social media accounts and promoting the work. And that was really indispensable training for my role now. Yeah. Running an organisation, because in some way I've had an insight into all of those different components that are involved. But one of the things that I find so interesting is that when people think of careers in the arts, they do think of those on-stage roles, they think of those very hyper-creative roles, the things that they sort of see in television documentaries, but they don't necessarily think of all of those additional skill sets that come into play in terms of marketing, technical work, financial work, bookkeeping, and producing, which is one of the most important roles in theatre making. And a producer is very much that central administrative point that is about managing an Excel budget, that is about sorting out people's accommodation and travel and all of these sorts of things.
But also more than that, actually, because I think for me, my most successful projects have had amazing producers attached to them. So I think there's something to be said about a good producer that actually unlocks the potential in the team. And I just think that that's just so rare. And it's amazing to get a creative producer who understands your needs, not just as a writer and an artist, but understands the need of the project as a whole, or of the mechanics of the thing that you're trying to make. And I think actually this is why theatre is so different to, say, you know, writing a novel or lots of other forms, and it's just so physical. It's almost like building a house.
And it needs loads of people.
It needs loads of people. But even as a writer, I go through the motions of like, oh, now I'm doing the plumbing, or now I'm doing the design, or now I'm painting the walls, or now I'm moving the furniture around. So you kind of like do have to dip into lots of metaphysical roles, but also real ones.
Theatre companies, you know, we're desperate to reflect the world that we live in. We're desperate to find the most exciting stories, new stories, unheard stories, unusual stories. And so consequently, we are really keen to always, and I speak for our organisation, but all of the organisations I've worked for over my career, which is probably about 20 or so by now, really determined to engage with as many people as possible. So actually writing that letter to a local theatre company or email and saying, can I just come in and observe for a few days? We do regard that as part of our responsibility, and that's kind of one of the beautiful and brilliant things about theatre making in the UK, certainly, that we really want to make a contribution to our communities. I mean, first and foremost, I was very lucky to go to a state school where there was theatre being made, and we had drama teachers and things. But actually, I had never considered that I would get a job in theatre. For me and for my background, I didn't realise there was kind of paid work there. So I actually originally went to university to read law, and was going to be a lawyer. And some of those skills have been useful, nonetheless, in doing the job now. But I really vividly remember thinking as a sort of 16, 17-year-old that the only way to work in theatre was to become an actor, and that if you did a bit of acting, after a while, somebody might ask you to be a director as well. And that, you know, and I don't know where that thought had come from, but that was really the image of it that I had. And so what was incredible for me was getting to university and taking part in student theatre there, and suddenly realising really clearly there were all these different roles that exist that all contribute to the creative process. That it's not just the kind of acting, the thing that we all see. So there is lighting design, there's sound design, there's composing, there's backstage electricians, there's stage management, which is a really specific role about organising the actors, supporting the director to figure out the scheduling of how a show will work, keeping an eye on all the different departments. A role like a production manager, who is the person that works with the set designer to oversee and ensure that the set is made on time, safely, with the right materials, and all these sorts of things. And you suddenly realise it's this massive beast, but that there are a range of really extraordinary practical roles within that. And that was a real light bulb moment for me. Because certainly in my job now, it really does combine the artistic and the practical. There is, of course, a myth that theatre is this very, very white, very middle class, very upper class kind of, you know, Shakespearean style place. And that's the experience you'll have when you go to one of those buildings with the lovely red velvet curtains and all this sort of stuff. Actually, there's a whole sector working away in the UK which is about theatre being really vibrant, really unexpected, really dynamic, working with musicians, DJs, dance artists, circus artists, to really challenge all of those conventions. My advice to my younger self, I mean, it's surprising advice because, as I think back to myself at 18, getting ready to go off to university, and not thinking that a career was possible in theatre. I would say to my younger self, hey, you know what? You're 10, 15 years into a career in theatre and you've earned a salary every year. You've managed to have paid, structured, regular work as a theatre maker, and that was possible.